Think deeply for a moment. Imagine waking up each day believing you're in control, that your choices come from free will, logic, and conscious intention. Now imagine discovering that much of what you call choice is actually reaction, that your deepest desires, fears, relationship patterns, even ambitions may not truly be yours, but inherited, conditioned, or unconsciously driven. This is the unsettling yet liberating heart of Carl Jung's work. Jung didn't believe we're born free. He believed freedom is rare, hard-won, and earned only through deep inner work. And most people, despite living in societies that praise liberty, never experience true psychological freedom. Ask yourself honestly if your emotions can be triggered without your consent, if your behavior repeats despite your best intentions, if your past silently shapes your present. Are you truly free, or simply unaware of the forces moving you? In this journey, we'll explore why Jung believed freedom is impossible without self-knowledge, why ignorance of the unconscious creates invisible chains, and why the final insight we'll reach is both disturbing and profoundly liberating. If you're drawn to deep questions about human nature, psychology, and the hidden architecture of the mind, this is for you. This isn't surface-level motivation. It's an invitation to awaken awareness where there was darkness, to reclaim inner authority where there was once unconscious submission. Before we go deeper, if this resonates, consider subscribing, liking, sharing, and leaving a comment. These small actions help this message reach others searching for answers they can't yet name. What follows has transformed countless lives and may reshape how you see yourself forever. Jung argued that most people are ruled by what they don't know about themselves. The unconscious isn't a dusty archive of old memories. It's alive, dynamic, active, constantly shaping your behavior. And when ignored, it doesn't stay quiet. It speaks through symptoms: anxiety, irrational fears, recurring dreams, emotional overreactions, and life patterns that repeat like clockwork. Ever wonder why certain situations trigger you far beyond their actual threat? Why specific people stir intense anger, envy, or admiration disproportionate to who they really are? Why you keep making the same mistakes even after swearing you wouldn't? Jung would say, these aren't character flaws. They're signals, the unconscious demanding attention. One of his key insights: the unconscious compensates for what consciousness denies. Suppress grief, it returns as numbness. Reject vulnerability, it leaks as control or rage. Disown your shadow, it shows up in projection. Unresolved inner conflict doesn't vanish, it manifests as anxiety, depression, self-sabotage, or chronic emptiness. True freedom for Jung isn't about eliminating these forces, it's about integrating them. Freedom begins when you stop being possessed by the unconscious and start relating to it consciously. Projection is one of the main traps that keep us unfree. We often hurl our disowned traits onto others. What we hate or idolize in someone else usually mirrors something unacknowledged within us. Ask yourself, who irritates you most? Who do you judge harshly or idealize excessively? These reactions aren't random, they're mirrors. And until you reclaim what you've projected, your freedom stays compromised. Jung also warned that modern life trains us to avoid ourselves. Endless noise, distraction, and busyness leave no room for stillness. Silence feels uncomfortable because it lets the unconscious rise. Stillness feels threatening because it reveals inner contradictions. Yet Jung insisted solitude and reflection are non-negotiable for liberation. Without inward attention, we remain fragmented, driven by impulses we don't understand. So ask yourself, when was the last time you sat alone with no phone, no escape, and simply observed what arose within? When did you last question the roots of your fears, desires, and beliefs instead of assuming they were truth? These moments aren't luxuries. They're the threshold of freedom. In the next part, we'll explore one of Jung's most challenging and misunderstood ideas: the shadow. It's the part of the psyche most people avoid, deny, or fear. Yet it holds immense energy, creativity, and truth. Understanding it isn't optional. It's essential for anyone seeking real freedom. Before we go deeper, reflect. Do you sense patterns in your life that feel beyond your control? Do parts of you feel hidden, contradictory, or unknown, even to yourself? Jung believed the greatest barrier to freedom isn't outside oppression, it's inner resistance. In the last section, we glimpsed the surface of this inner prison. Now we step into its core. Because as Jung warned, the very thing you refuse to look at is the thing that controls you. He called this hidden dimension the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's simply everything you've rejected, suppressed or disowned to fit in, survive or be loved. Traits deemed unacceptable, emotions you learned to hide, impulses you feared, potentials you never dared explore, all of it got buried. From childhood, you were shaped by what earned approval and what brought shame. Slowly you learned which parts of yourself were okay and which had to disappear. But those parts didn't vanish. They went underground. They became your shadow. Here's the hard truth Jung revealed. The shadow doesn't fade when ignored. It grows. And when it grows in darkness, it starts steering your life in invisible, destructive ways. It shows up as passive aggression, jealousy, resentment, arrogance, self-sabotage, or even false humility. Jung warned, the more someone insists they're good or moral, the more dangerous their unconscious shadow becomes, because denial feeds it. When you refuse to acknowledge your own darkness, you project it outward. You see it everywhere, except in yourself. That's why Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Freedom isn't found in pretending to be pure. It's found in becoming whole. Ask yourself something difficult. What parts of yourself do you hide, even from your own awareness? What emotions do you condemn in others but deny in yourself? Anger, envy, the hunger for power, the fear of being insignificant? These aren't moral failures. They're human realities, and until you face them, they run your life. Jung saw that people possessed by their shadow often believe they're acting freely, while actually driven by unconscious compulsion. Someone who denies their aggression keeps attracting conflict. Someone who denies their need for control manipulates subtly. Someone who denies their fear becomes rigid, even authoritarian. That's why Jung insisted, freedom demands radical honesty, not self-judgment, but self-recognition. Shadow integration doesn't mean acting out dark impulses. It means acknowledging them, understanding their roots, and consciously choosing how to relate to them. When integrated, shadow energy transforms. Aggression becomes assertiveness. Envy becomes inspiration. Fear becomes wisdom. Yes, it's uncomfortable. It shatters the idealized image you've built of yourself. But Jung believed clinging to that false self is far more dangerous than facing the truth. Modern life offers endless escapes: distraction, moral outrage, identity labels, external enemies, all perfect outlets for projection. Jung saw this clearly in groups, movements, even nations. When individuals refuse to confront their own shadows, they create enemies in the world. That's why his work remains so unsettling and so vital. He didn't flatter the ego. He challenged it. So ask yourself again, when you feel morally superior, when righteous anger rises, when you're certain others are the problem, have you ever paused to ask, what part of me am I avoiding right now? That question alone can dissolve years of unconscious bondage. In the next part, we go even deeper. We'll explore why Jung believed true freedom requires confronting not just your personal shadow, but the deeper currents that shape all human experience. These forces influence your identity, relationships, and sense of meaning itself. Before we continue, reflect. What aspect of yourself do you fear acknowledging most? And what might it be costing you to keep it hidden? Because Jung knew, even after facing your personal shadow, most people are still far from freedom. Why? Beneath your individual wounds, beneath your personal history, lies a deeper layer of the psyche, older, vaster, and far more powerful. Jung called it the collective unconscious. Unlike the personal unconscious, shaped by your life, the collective unconscious is inherited. It's a reservoir of universal patterns, instincts, and symbols shared by all humans across time and culture. These patterns, what Jung called archetypes, shape how you see reality, form relationships, search for meaning, and even define yourself. You may believe your identity is entirely your own. But Jung would challenge that. He saw that many of your deepest drives aren't chosen. They arise from ancient psychological blueprints, guiding human behavior for millennia. Think about it. Why do certain stories move you beyond reason? Why do symbols like the hero, the mother, the wise elder, or the tyrant feel instantly familiar across cultures, across time? Why do people everywhere dream similar dreams, tell parallel myths, wrestle with the same existential questions? Jung believed these are echoes of the collective unconscious speaking through you. And here's where freedom gets complicated. If you're unaware of these forces, you don't relate to them, you're possessed by them. Jung warned that unconsciously identifying with an archetype is a subtle prison. The person gripped by the hero feels compelled to save everyone, often destroying themselves in the process. The one fused with the victim unconsciously seeks suffering, reinforcing powerlessness. The one overtaken by the ruler craves control, driven by fear they can't admit. These patterns don't feel imposed. They feel like identity. That's why they're so hard to see. Ask yourself, do you constantly feel you must prove yourself? Do you carry the weight of fixing others? Do you feel unseen, destined to struggle, perpetually unappreciated? These narratives may feel personal, but Jung would say they're archetypal scripts playing out through you. True freedom means recognizing these scripts without becoming their prisoner. For Jung, the goal of life wasn't happiness, success, or perfection. It was individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming a whole, conscious individual, distinct from collective expectations and unconscious roles. This demands something radical, separating who you truly are from inherited beliefs, cultural conditioning, and archetypal possession. Individuation isn't rebellion against society. It's inner sovereignty. And here's one of Jung's most unsettling truths. Many people fear individuation more than suffering. Why? Because it brings responsibility. Once you see your patterns, you can no longer blame fate, parents, or society. Freedom means owning your choices, and that weight terrifies the unready mind. That's why Jung saw people resist awareness. Unconsciousness feels innocent. Consciousness reveals complicity. Dreams are vital in this journey. Jung saw them as messages from the unconscious, guides toward balance. Ignoring them is like refusing a compass while claiming you seek direction. Pay attention to recurring symbols, emotions, themes in dreams and daily life. They're not random, they're the psyche's attempt to restore inner order. Now ask yourself another hard question. If you stripped away your roles, labels, and unconscious stories, who would be left? And would you recognize that person? In the final part, we reach Jung's most crucial insight, the threshold between unconscious existence and true freedom. This isn't abstract philosophy. It's practical, demanding, and life-changing. Jung believed the last barrier to freedom is the most subtle. Even after facing your shadow, even after seeing archetypal forces, you can still remain divided. Why? Because awareness alone doesn't liberate. The final truth is this: you're not free just because you understand yourself. You're free only when you take responsibility for what you've become conscious of. Jung warned that insight without action leads to inflation. A person may speak beautifully about self-knowledge, yet remain trapped in old habits. Freedom isn't an idea, it's a way of being. The unconscious doesn't ask you to judge yourself. It asks you to relate consciously to what you discover. Every realization places a choice in your hands: to act differently, to respond instead of react, to pause where you once charged blindly. This is where most retreat, because responsibility weighs more than ignorance. Jung observed, people often prefer familiar suffering over freedom that demands change, because known pain feels safer than the unknown. Patterns, even destructive ones, give us identity. Breaking them takes courage, patience, and humility. True freedom begins when you stop asking, "Who's to blame?" and start asking, "What is required of me now?" Not in theory, in practice. This doesn't mean controlling every thought or emotion. Jung never preached rigid self-discipline. He believed wholeness comes from dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious. You listen, you reflect, You choose how to respond. Freedom isn't the absence of inner conflict. It's the ability to hold tension without breaking, to feel fear without being ruled by it, desire without being consumed, darkness without acting it out unconsciously. The integrated person becomes anchored, less reactive, less dependent on approval, less swayed by collective fear or hype. They're not perfect, but they're real. That's why Jung saw individuation as a moral task, not about rules, but about responsibility to yourself and the world. An unconscious person spreads chaos without knowing it. A conscious one becomes a quiet source of stability. Ask yourself this final question. If every reaction you have today shapes not just your life, but the psychological atmosphere around you, what kind of presence are you becoming? Freedom isn't given. It's earned moment by moment through awareness, responsibility, and courage. Jung once said the greatest gift you can offer the world is your own consciousness. Because someone who understands themselves no longer needs to dominate, escape, or project. They act from inner alignment. And here's the truth most avoid. You'll never be free until you stop running from yourself. Until you accept that this work belongs to you alone. And until you choose, again and again, to live what you understand, not just know it. If this journey resonated, reflect deeply. Share what challenged you. What insight are you ready to live, not just believe? Freedom begins there. Yet even now, Jung would caution, this isn't a finish line. Freedom isn't a destination. It's a daily relationship with yourself, renewed through conscious attention. Life keeps presenting the same inner material, not to punish you, but to ask one question, are you awake yet? Each repetition is an invitation. Each trigger, a lesson unfinished. Each disturbance, a signal that something still seeks integration. The unconscious isn't your enemy. It's a guide, speaking in symbols, emotions, patterns. When ignored, it shouts. When listened to, it teaches. Many mistake freedom for comfort or ease. Jung saw it differently. A meaningful life holds paradox, strength and vulnerability, light and shadow, certainty and doubt. Freedom isn't eliminating tension, it's containing it consciously. When you stop fleeing inner conflict, something shifts. You no longer need distraction to numb yourself. You no longer need enemies to define you. You no longer need approval to feel real. Your center moves inward. This changes everything. You listen more. React less. Choose deliberately. When old patterns try to take over, you don't obey. You pause. And in that pause, freedom lives. Jung believed this inner work isn't selfish. Unconscious people unknowingly spread their inner chaos into families, relationships, institutions, even nations. What you refuse to face within doesn't vanish. It appears outside. That's why self-knowledge isn't a luxury. It's a responsibility. Ask yourself honestly, where are you still reacting instead of responding? Blaming instead of understanding? Repeating instead of choosing? These questions aren't meant to shame you. They're meant to wake you up. Freedom doesn't mean you'll never feel fear, anger, or doubt again. It means those feelings no longer define you. You can observe them without becoming them. Learn from them without being lost in them. Jung once said the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. Not who you were conditioned to be, not who you pretend to be, but who emerges when illusion falls away. And beneath it all lies this quiet truth. No one can do this work for you. No system, ideology, or authority can replace your own awareness. Liberation begins the moment you stop outsourcing your inner life. So reflect, not just once, but often. Ask not only what you think, but why. Not only what you feel, but what it's asking of you. Not only who you are today, but who you're becoming through your choices. That is the work. That is the path. And that is where freedom is found. Thanks for watching.